Why do keyboards look like this? Take a look at your keyboard for a second. QWERTY. 6 letters that seem to have been scattered almost at random. It doesn't follow the alphabet. It doesn't follow frequency. And somehow, nearly every computer, laptop, and smartphone on Earth still uses it. Why? Was this really the best layout humanity could come up with? But then, if you've spent any time on the internet, you've probably heard the answer. QWERTY was supposedly designed to slow people down. Early typewriters jammed if people typed too fast, so the inventor deliberately made the keyboard inefficient. It's one of those facts everyone seems to know, except it probably isn't true, and the real story turns out to be much stranger and much more interesting. Imagine you're building the very first practical typewriter in the late 1800s. Nobody has ever learned to touch type because typing doesn't exist yet. There are no standards, no expectations. You can arrange the letters any way you want. So why wouldn't you simply put them in alphabetical order? In fact, that's exactly what Christopher Latham Sholes did in some of his earliest prototypes. The first keyboards looked far more logical than today's. But they also revealed a problem no one had anticipated. Early typewriters weren't electronic. Every key was connected to a long metal arm called a type bar. Press a key, and that arm would swing upward, strike an ink ribbon against the paper, and leave a letter behind. It was an ingenious machine. It was also surprisingly delicate. If 2 nearby type bars were activated almost simultaneously, they could collide and lock together. Not because the typist was too fast in general, but because certain combinations of letters caused neighboring mechanisms to crash into each other. Sholes spent years experimenting with different arrangements, trying to reduce these clashes while keeping the machine practical. Historians still debate exactly which design decisions mattered most because detailed records are incomplete. But what most experts agree on is this: there is little evidence that QWERTY was created to deliberately slow typists. If anything, the goal was the opposite: to make typing smoother by reducing mechanical interference so people could keep typing without constantly stopping to untangle jammed type bars. By the early 1870s, Sholes sold his invention to Remington, a company better known at the time for making firearms than office equipment. Remington refined both the machine and the keyboard before releasing the first commercially successful typewriter in 1874. And that's where something fascinating happened. The keyboard wasn't instantly perfect. It was simply successful. As businesses adopted Remington's machines, people invested time learning the layout. Schools began teaching it. Secretaries practiced it for hundreds of hours. Manufacturers copied it because customers expected familiarity. The layout stopped being just a design. It became an ecosystem. Then, decades later, someone asked an uncomfortable question. What if we started over? In the 1930s, August Dvorak believed the keyboard could be dramatically improved. Instead of scattering common letters around the keyboard, he carefully analyzed English letter frequencies. His design placed the most frequently used letters on the home row, where your fingers naturally rest. The goal was simple: less finger movement, more comfort, potentially greater speed. On paper, it made a lot of sense. Many people who switch to Dvorak genuinely like it. Studies have shown it can reduce finger travel, and experienced users often report that it feels more comfortable. So why isn't everyone using it? Because designing a better system isn't the same as replacing an existing one. Imagine convincing every office worker, every school, every manufacturer, every typing teacher, every government agency, and eventually every computer company to relearn decades of muscle memory. The keyboard itself is cheap. Changing millions of people isn't. Economists call this network effect. The value of using something increases simply because everyone else already uses it. Think about driving on one side of the road. Even if the opposite side were somehow slightly better, switching would create chaos. Compatibility matters more than perfection. QWERTY reached that point long before computers existed. When computers arrived in the 20th century, engineers faced a choice. Should they invent a brand new layout, or keep the one everyone already knew? The answer was obvious. By preserving QWERTY, people could move from typewriters to computers almost effortlessly. Businesses didn't need to retrain employees. Typing textbooks remained useful. Existing skills transferred immediately. What had started as a mechanical solution, or at least a heavily evolved mechanical compromise, became a digital standard. Ironically, modern keyboards no longer suffer from the problem that inspired all those experiments in the first place. There are no type bars waiting to collide inside your laptop. Your keyboard could be arranged almost any way. Yet changing it would probably cost more than leaving it alone. This also explains why so many better keyboard layouts struggle to gain traction. It's not that they're necessarily worse. It's that they're competing against billions of hours of existing human habit. Even today, alternatives like Dvorak and Colemak have enthusiastic communities. Some programmers, writers, and enthusiasts swear by them. Others try them for a few weeks before giving up because switching is surprisingly difficult. Not because the layouts are bad, because your brain has quietly memorized thousands of tiny finger movements over years of typing. You're not thinking about where the T key is. Your hands already know. And perhaps that's the biggest twist of all. People often assume technology evolves by constantly replacing old ideas with better ones. Sometimes it does. But sometimes a good enough solution arrives first, becomes widely adopted, and grows so deeply connected to everything around it that replacing it becomes harder than living with its imperfections. QWERTY isn't a museum piece we've forgotten to update. It's a reminder that history leaves fingerprints on everyday life. Every email you send, every search you type, every password you enter begins with a design whose origins stretch back nearly 150 years. Not because it's unquestionably the fastest layout ever invented, but because millions of people, companies, and technologies built on top of it until changing course became almost impossible. So the next time you glance down at those 6 strange letters across the top of your keyboard, remember this. They aren't there because someone wanted to slow you down. They're there because once enough people agree on a system, the hardest thing in the world isn't inventing something better. It's convincing everyone else to change.